Hello everyone, Kabir here. Thank you so much for joining and supporting this initiative. We will be starting in the next 5 minutes, so please be patient till then. Thank you so much once again for joining. Hello everyone. A happy new year to all of you, and a big thank you to everyone who's here to support this initiative and learn something new. I request you all to start your videos, whoever can, when because we are starting the event right now. And yes, soon we will also be inviting our guest on stage, Miss Kasturi Gandhi. I'm Kabir Jasin from Inspiring Stories, your anchor of the event today. This is the third event of the Inspiring Stories series, which has only one goal to help choose people's career and interact with different dedicated professionals and experts to keep you inspired. This initiative also aims to promote SDG Goal 4 quality education. So recently, there's so much going on in the world, right? We were just about to resume our routine, and we suddenly hear this newest variant, the Omicron variant, which is now also the third wave of COVID-19. And this puts all of us again back to our home on our laptop screens and gadgets. So now, when we think of it, how did we know about Omicron, or how did we know about the coronavirus? Through people on social media? Yeah, that may be one point of view, but what is the main source to all this? Who is the one that researches and helps us about help know about everything in the world? From COVID-19 to existence of atoms, molecules, and plants and trees. Can someone help me with the answer in the chat? Whoever knows can please help me with the answer in the chat. Who do you think helps us with all of this? Is it scientists, researchers? Who is it? Can someone please put it in the chat? Scientists, yes. Yes, Miss Marsha, you're correct. It's scientists. And any other responses by anyone? Please, I encourage you to put it in the chat. Yes, Sandy Uncle also says scientists. Yes, so most of you are correct. It is scientists and researchers. They are also one major point to all of this. Ishan also says scientists, doctors, researchers, etc. So yes, all of these are the people that help us know about everything in the world, and then it further goes on to social media and reaches till us. So yes, you are correct. It's the researchers and scientists that help us know about all of this. And coincidentally, today for our Inspiring Stories event, we have an environmentalist researcher, Ms. Kasturi Gandhi, here to tell us about her career, how she became an environmentalist researcher, and more. Ms. Kasturi Gandhi is also from the fifth generation of our patriotic leader and freedom fighter, our beloved Mr. Mahatma Gandhi's family. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Ms. Kasturi Gandhi. Ms. Kasturi Gandhi, would you like to say a few words?
Hi, Kabir, and good evening to everybody. A happy new year to everyone as well. I live in Mumbai. As Kabir said, I'm an environmental researcher. Currently, I'm researching environmental policies. The focus of my research right now is environmental education in India. But my overarching interest is in the intersection of human and environment and how we connect with our landscapes. I'm sure we'll talk about this more in detail as the evening goes, but this is my introduction, more or less.
Thank you so much to come here and support this initiative, Ms. Kasturi. It's a great.
Thank you for inviting me.
For not only me, but all of us to know about you and your career and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how the event will go like. I will ask Ms. Kasturi a few questions about her career, her life, and her journey to become a researcher. And in every few questions, I shall open up the floor to the audience to ask their questions to Ms. Kasturi. And we may have a few quiz questions to Ms. Kasturi and the audience in the middle so that it's interactive and fun. So let's start with our first question of the day for Ms. Kasturi. So, Ms. Kasturi, what made you become an environmental researcher and take up this career?
Okay, so I think the way we kind of grow up in India, at least this is how I grew up, is that in school you kind of decide what subjects you're good at. If you're good at the sciences, then what is talked at home is that you can become an engineer or a doctor. If you're good at maths, then it's like, okay, you can become a chartered accountant or something, commercey. I wasn't good at science or maths, but I really liked the literature and language subjects. And I have a family history of like journalists. So early on, the conversation was that I would pursue journalism. And that's how I kind of prepared myself growing up. So when I was done with high school, I studied BA, which is a Bachelor of Arts. And then for my undergraduate major, I took on English literature at St. Xavier's College. Um, and then I did like this postgrad diploma in communication. And I always wanted to kind of write about development stories. That's how I cultivated a sort of story mindset where I approached issues as stories that need to be researched. So that's where the researcher part comes from. The environment part comes from, naturally, I was very passionate about the planet that I was born in, the country I was born in, and my immediate surroundings. Growing up in Bombay, we're always very close to the ocean. So I think I was always very interested in learning more about the environment. And the policy part comes from the fact that I did my master's in public policy. And that became an avenue to approach very complex subjects like environment and people. That's a very, very brief story of how I became an environmental policy researcher. To be fair, I've been, this policy researcher for the past 3 or 4 years, but I've done a lot of other stuff before that, on this journey, which equally informed what I'm doing right now. But yeah, I hope that answers your question
Yes,
about how I.
it's a very interesting story of how you chose your career and how you
Mhm.
became an environmental policy researcher.
Right.
Our next question is also related to the first question. So, as you told us that from when you were a child, you always were very passionate about your environment and your surroundings
Mhm.
around you. So, if you were not an environmental policy researcher right now, what would you be right now? Which career would you be in right now?
So a few years ago, before I took on policy research, I also worked as a documentary filmmaker, which involved a lot of research, of course. But I think that filmmaking was a very good outlet for me in a creative sense to kind of, record stories and then present them to the world in a certain way. And I do miss it right now. And, when all I'm doing is um, research and writing, I do miss being out and filming and then editing the film and, all those creative decisions. I think I would have been a filmmaker if not. And another, I guess, this was, the past year owing to the pandemic and also having had a few medical scares in my own family. I had to visit the hospital quite a bit. And I sort of look back at my life in school and wish I had paid more attention in my science lectures to be like a medical expert or a nurse or a doctor, because I think that's a very noble profession given the current climate.
Yes, ma'am, that's so interesting because in this situation, those are the social workers around us are really important because those are the people who are on the front line and helping us all the
Right.
time, every single second, be it day, night, 24 by 7. So that's a really interesting story of what you have of yours. And could you please give us a little more detail on your documentary filmmaking? So, what exactly did you work on?
Sure. So, as I was on this path to becoming a journalist, I did a year and a half of a postgraduate diploma in a field called communication for development, which essentially taught you how to use traditional or mass media to bring about social change and awareness. One of the things, so we learned things like radio, street theater, photography, and filmmaking. And I was lucky enough to get an internship during that final, semester with the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, which is NABARD, with their corporate communications team. Now, at that time, this was the year 2014, when YouTube channels were becoming, were the new thing. NABARD wanted to create a YouTube channel to showcase their projects. And they have projects all over India, like in the most remote of villages, they have very interesting work. So they hired me and some of my classmates, 5 of us, and sent us to parts of South India and Northeast India for like months to just go and film their stories. So my early films were about agricultural interventions in villages in South and Northeast India. After a year of doing that, we all split, and I went to Kutch and worked with an NGO as an archival assistant, which meant that I was, archives is basically a collection of research. So I was in charge of putting together research that had not been done before, and mostly from the oral histories perspective. So there's a lot of fear right now amongst artisan communities that people who practice craft are turning old. And when they go, their knowledge will also go with them. So my job was essentially to go around and take videos and make very extensive notes of their knowledge of the world that they had seen and grown up in, the changes that they had seen, and how they practiced their craft earlier versus now. So 2 films that I made in that year, 2015, one was on the leather craft of Kutch, with a focus on the community that practices that craft, which is the Meghwar community. Along with that topic came, a focus on caste relations, because that practice is looked down upon because of how you associate with like a dead animal, their skin and so on. So that was the theme of like craft tools, caste relations, fast fashion versus, now it's called fast fashion, but basically factory made leather versus hand cured leather. And the second film that I made was on recycled plastic weaving, which is a project that women weavers in Kutch have started, which is using waste plastic, cleaning it up, cutting it into like ribbons and creating a yarn out of it, and then integrating it into their traditional weaving machines to create woven, carpets and bags. And how this was a project to bring, a source of livelihood for them. A lot of them were widows, single parents, or, single women who didn't have any other sources of income. And secondly, to kind of reduce waste in their landscapes, because plastic is a huge problem in rural parts where there aren't a lot of systems to get rid of it. So that was actually the last time I made a film. But yeah, it was very interesting time.
Wow, ma'am, that sounds so interesting. So it's a mix of performing arts and researching in your whole.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So my next question, as you mentioned that also while being a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker, you visited many different places, different cities, different countries to make notes of your work. So I'm sure you must have done the same for researching too, because environmental policy researching also needs, it's a big part of it too.
Yeah.
So could you please tell us which countries or which cities have you traveled around the globe? And I think all of us would also wish to know what topics for research did you go there to for?
Sure. So I haven't traveled the world for research. My focus was India, because those were the years that I was really sort of fascinated by the variety of stories present in this country. Also, like as a 20-year-old, you don't have that much money to travel the world, right? So I traveled internally, but it was incredibly exciting. So um, I'll start with my most recent experience, and then I'll go into a general overview of what I did before that. But in from 2019 to 2020, I was researching a coastal policy, which is the CRZ, which was um, which was sort of gazetted in order to regulate how we use coastal areas for sustainable development. So there are a lot of rules that you can do this in this zone, you can do that in this zone, and so on. My focus was on the coastal policy and its impact on Mumbai, the Mumbai metropolitan region. So, although I've grown up in this city, there aren't a lot of places that I've still been to. For my research, I went literally so the Mumbai metropolitan region goes from some point in Virar right up to Raigad district. So it spans almost 3 districts, the entire coastline. And I had to go to all those points where there are fishing villages, where there are commercial construction projects, where there are ports, where there are islands. So that was really, really interesting to see, like the Manori area, to see Uran, to see all these flamingo and bird sanctuaries along the Thane Creek, and also to see how in this very urbanized city, there are still pockets where indigenous Koli communities live, and still have some sort of like traditional connection to the city, because they came here like thousands of years ago and are believed to be the first inhabitants of Mumbai. Um, that was really, really cool because, I'd wake up early in the morning and take the ferry from Bhauchadakka it's in the docks area of the Bombay Harbor, and go to Uran or go to Alibag. Before that, I traveled for research in Kutch. Again, very interesting area. When you think of Kutch, you think of the white salt desert only, but there's a lot more, because Kutch is also where the largest grasslands in Asia are, which is the Bunny grasslands. Something that I didn't make a film on, but I photographed for that project, was the nomadic camel herders of Kutch, who travel the area seasonally to graze their herds of camels and goats and so on. So following them through Bunny to, to the right up till the border between Kutch and Pakistan, that was interesting as well. And then for the Nabard films, in the Northeast, there was a very interesting project in Nagaland, which was underground beekeeping, where there's a community of, these are tribal communities who rear bees for honey. But the special quality about these bees is that they live underground. So the intervention there was to create concrete hives for them so that the moisture of monsoon doesn't seep in, doesn't affect the quality of honey and so on. So that was an interesting film to make. In the south, in Mandya district of Mangalore, there was this man called Kumlakai Gowda, who is this old farmer who's been all over the world to talk about his methods of farming, which are completely organic and sustainable. So we kind of spent 3 days just on his farm, eating under the shade of a tree, hearing, and he didn't know a word of Hindi or English, like he spoke in his language. But the passion with which he works, the way he also runs a radio program for other farmers in his community to tell them about what international farmers are doing, what they can do. There are many such stories. I don't know if I can keep talking about them, but they're available on my website. with some really cool stories from rural India. So that's the extent of my travels for research so far.
Yes, ma'am. So you mentioned about one of the shoemakers of Kutch also, right? So
Hmm.
I actually want to show the audience the video of that on your website. So
Okay.
I'll just share my screen for a short video. So this is on ma'am's website. It's Rohi Stories of the Shoemakers of Kutch. I'll just play this small video.
प्रेम के रंग में ऐसी डूबी बन गया एक ही रूप प्रेम के रंग में ऐसी डूबी बन गया एक ही रूप प्रेम की माला जपते 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 प्रेम की माला जपते जपते आज बनी में श्याम प्रेम की माला जपते जपते आज बनी में श्याम सांसों की माला पे सांसों की माला पे सिमरू में सांसों की माला पे सिमरू
Wow, ma'am, that was so interesting of how each of the shoemakers of Kutch make the shoes with so much of hard work and effort. That was really amazing. It was a very nice video. And I encourage all of you to check out ma'am's website. It has many such videos and different topics like these, which I'll also show you in the end of our event. So I think let's have another question, and then we'll open it up to the audience to ask their share of questions too. So my last question before I open the floor to the audience to you is, as all of us know, you're a researcher at the Bosman Center. So, can you please share with all of us what you require to become a researcher? What degree do you need, or which are the best colleges or best people your connects around to achieve to become a researcher on your pathway?
Yeah. So I kind of feel like anyone is a researcher. You don't anyone with a curiosity about a topic or a world begins as a researcher, right? Like you first study the topic that you're passionate about, and then you kind of become an expert at it. When you become a scientific researcher, which is what I aspire to be, is when you have certain methods of working, and this is what is taught to you. Look, I'm not aware of any specific program that gives you a degree in research, but I kind of learned scientific research in my public policy lectures, which was a master's program. For 2 semesters, actually all 4 semesters, we had a topic called research methodology, in which they teach you, first of all, what kinds of research there are, what methods and what approaches are there, which is summed up into qualitative and quantitative research. Qualitative research is research into like more intangible themes, which is behavior, which is why do people believe in God? Those kinds of really big questions to which there's no definite clinical answer. Quantitative research, on the other hand, gives you very solid numbers and data. You get data in both, but in quantitative research, it's a very clean set of like a yes and no answer, or those kinds of things, like how many people own a Tata Sumo in Santa Cruz West would be a quantitative research question. So the other parts of research, when it gets more complicated, is when you learn statistics, when you learn how to analyze the data that you've collected. Then there is something called a confidence interval. There are lots of ways to kind of verify what you've researched is accurate, or there's nothing like a perfect finding, but it's close to what is the actual picture. Firstly, to kind of become a researcher, I think you need to be comfortable removing yourself from the picture, because none of your own like biases and personal views can tamper with the research. I think that's the first very, very important skill you need to have. The second skill is to learn how to approach people and talk to them. Not everyone is going to give you the time of their day. Not everyone is going to talk to you the way you anticipate they will. So there's a way to kind of approach people and communities very often. And this is something I feel really bad about as a researcher, is that you go into communities that have been affected very badly by something, and they kind of spend their lives like just answering journalists, answering researchers, repeating their traumas to us. And research is a very long process. Like, you don't get very quick answers, you don't get very quick solutions. So that you have to be very sensitive handling those kinds of situations. So that's a big learning. So research is as much about like your people skills as it is about being able to identify data. I learned these courses at St. Xavier's College during my master's, like I said. The Tata Institute of Social Sciences is very, very good for research as well. I believe in the IITs also, they have a lot of research groups. So any specialization would require to know how to research. Then it's up to you how you expand your skill set. You can learn Excel, because Excel is very useful to collate your data and then access it in a systematic way. The other thing, so I have this tool, which is my voice recorder. It's very handy to kind of, obviously, to get permission from people before you record them, but you have to be a good listener and you have to let people kind of talk to you. A lot of times they won't tell you honest things, so you have to also have the sort of ability to filter what they're saying from what is actually the case. What else? I feel like I'm digressing. Your question was?
No problem. Now, so my question
Okay.
is really about all of this actually. How do
Okay.
you become a researcher? So it's totally on point.
Yeah, so I think I became a researcher while learning something else. Like, I didn't get into this field saying I want to be a researcher. I was learning policy, I guess, because I was passionate about the environment. And the other reason is also because, like, in the past 2 years, when we've been expected to stay at home as far as possible, a lot of us have kind of stayed because we've had parents who we need to look after or whatever. So this was a good option to kind of, which required me to read, which I could do from home. So sometimes, like, if it's like a matter of convenience as well.
Yes, ma'am, totally. So what an inspiring story you had, and you told us all about how did you become a researcher and how can we, and how difficult it is sometimes to filter out the information a person is trying to give you. So now I think it's time to open up the floor to the audience. So here's how it's going to go. Everyone who wants to ask a question, please raise your hands. I'll unmute you, and then you can further ask your question. And if we are not able to finish all of the questions at once, there'll also be another round of question and answer at the end of the event. So don't worry, your question will be answered by Ms. Kasturi. So I think first I would like to go with Angad. He's eagerly been waiting. So I'll just unmute you, Angad, and you can ask your question to Ms. Kasturi.
Yes. Hello everyone. My name is Angad. Yeah. So my question is, how do we make people stop using plastic?
So hi Anga, thank you for asking this question. It's a very important question. I have a couple of answers to this, but my immediate answer as a researcher would be to first figure out why people use so much plastic. Instead of being like a black and white, oh, plastic is good or plastic is bad, we need to get very realistic about that. Plastic does serve a very important purpose in the way we live. Can you imagine hospitals without plastic? Can you imagine, in your own school bag, you might have a lot of plastic elements. This is also something that we need to be sensitive about. Alternatives to plastic are not affordable for so many communities in our own country. So then is it okay for us to just tell people, hey, don't use plastic, Instead, can we create an ecosystem where it's very easy for people to not use plastic, where it's, it becomes second nature for them to say, no, I won't use plastic and I'll use this instead. So I feel like as a researcher, I've been sensitized to this about like how plastic serves a lot of purposes for a lot of people. And instead of point blank saying, no, stop using plastic, close down plastic factories, rendering so many people jobless, our approach should be, what purpose does plastic serve and what are the other cheaper alternatives to it? Only then I think can we find a solution. But the other answer to this is also that documentaries, well-made advertisements, street theater, radio shows, these have helped. When you the program that I studied on communication for development was a UNESCO program, and they have a lot of their campaigns sort of disseminated to publics via radio shows, via street theater, via pamphlets, and so on. So these are very good avenues for you to communicate messages and alternatives. You have to speak the language of your stakeholder.
Thank you so much, Angad, for asking that question. And I hope your question was answered by Ms. Kasturi. Thank you so much, Ms. Kasturi, too, for answering Angad's question. And now I think Arjun, you would like to ask Ms. a question.
Thank you, Kabir, for making this meeting. I'm Arjun Unyal, and my question is, what or who inspired you?
Thanks, Arjun, for your question. I think I was inspired by some of my professors who are researchers. I remember one of my professors, Professor Ananga, she does a lot of research. She's done a variety of research projects during her career. She was researching patients suffering from tuberculosis. And the stories that she told us in class, of like how sometimes, they were forced to wear a mask when they had to talk to people with TB because you don't want to get the disease and so on. And she told us about how she chose to not wear the mask around them because she felt like it was dehumanizing them. The moment you enter a room with all this protection, there's a barrier between you and the person. Of course, that's one extreme, like you should protect yourself. But the kind of sensitivity and humanity that this profession sometimes allows really inspired me. Another professor from my public policy program, Dr. Avnish Kumar, he also really inspired me because of the way research has shaped his life and his academic career, his sensibilities and views on the world. That was very interesting to me. So I think those were my inspirations. And of course, journalism was inspired by people in my family who worked as journalists and reporters. I think research is a very important part of journalism anyway. So that was the driving force.
Thank you so much for attending this event and answering this question, Arjun. And our next question, I think Vivan wants to ask us a question. So I'll just unmute him.
Hi, Ms. Kasturi. I am Vivan, and I have a question that does it make you feel special and extremely proud to belong to this family that helped India achieve freedom?
Yeah, Yeah, Vivan, my brother's name is also Vivan. Of course, it makes me very proud, and it's something that I carry very lovingly in my heart, my heritage and my lineage. I also acknowledge that it brings a lot of privilege into my life, in the way like I'm invited on this program because of this, partly because of this lineage as well. So it's very humbling. It's also sometimes very difficult to, once people know this about you, they fixate on it, they don't really want to know anything else about you. So it's a little bit challenging to navigate that space where you kind of have to fit into their imagined version of what does MK Gandhi's great great granddaughter talk like, or like dress like, or look like, whatever. So sometimes that pressure is a little bit tough. But overall, of course, I'm very proud, and I feel like a lot of my career moves have been informed by this lineage, where I have to have social causes at the heart of what I'm doing and my practice. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Viman, for asking that question. And yes, Miss, I think that is, I think you're very proud of the fact that you are a part of the family, but you also have your own identity being an environmental policy researcher. So I think our next question is by Rena. I think she's been waiting from a long time. So Rena, I'm just unmuting you to ask your question.
I think she's written her question down. My mic's not working.
Oh, I think Rena's
There
mic.
were ups and downs. Sometimes I
Okay.
really thought you couldn't do it anymore. The audience and I would be delighted. Some stories of your career where there were ups and downs would easily be this past year, when one was forced to be at home, and like research in requires you to go out and kind of interact with people. This year it was very challenging, these past 2 years of the pandemic, because 2020 is when I started my research on environmental education, and my research supervisor is in Salisbury University in America. So we hardly speak, and typically you would be in close touch with your supervisor, with your supervisory committee. There would be regular sessions on feedback, on showing them your research. This time it wasn't so, because of time difference and distance and so on. So most of the time I was very, very alone in this exact same position at my desk, just reading like pages and pages and pages of literature, which is something that you do before, starting your exploration. You do a literature review, which is you review all the material that has been written about this subject. Doing that in from the same place every single day while the world around you is kind of, going into a very bad place, it was very isolating and sad for me. I got very lonely at times and kind of wished for like a circle of people that I could discuss my research with. Secondly, coming up with ways to do your interviews remotely via Zoom, getting people to answer your questionnaires, in a way was very efficient, because the computer, email, all that allows you, Google Forms, very easy to use tools. But at the same time, it's very different when you sit across from somebody, ask them your questions and get your answers. So I think those have been and continue to be my challenges, because like Kabir mentioned at the start of this program, just as you were ready to get out into the world again, we're forced back in. So this continues to be a challenge for me. Very often I've just been like, I really don't want to do this anymore. I just want to join a straightforward job where I go in the morning and come back in the evening, and that's it. Research goes into the nights, it goes into your weekends. It becomes your life. And that can be quite challenging. But I guess that happens to everybody in whatever field they're in. Sometimes, what else? Yeah, that's it, right?
Yes, ma'am, I think that's all the question. And yes, this time has been very difficult for all of us. And the health workers, social workers are standing, the frontline workers who are helping us. But the main thing is never to give up on your passion and keep working on it like Ms. Kasturi is doing. And I would now like to take only last two questions, and then we'll move it forward to the next question and answer round in the end of the event. So don't worry, everyone will get their questions answered by Ms. Kasturi. So our next question is by Siddhant. Siddhant, could you please, I'll just unmute you and ask your question to Ms. Kasturi.
Hello. My name is Siddhant, and my question is, what is the most rewarding thing of being a environmentalist researcher?
Hi, Siddhant. Thank you for your question. The most rewarding thing is sometimes feeling like you're part of the solution to all these problems. Again, Kabir said this in the beginning of the show, is that how do we know what we know? It's because of researchers. And any scientific policy reform, any, sustainable development policy only comes when you've done your research and you continue to do it. Your decisions are informed by clinical scientific research. So I think that's being a part of this solution to a lot of environmental issues makes me proud to be in this. But also, like, overall, I think I really want to serve people who have felt like their voices have not been heard. For example, when I was in Kutch, when I made the film on the leather artisans, like, you watched a snippet of the teaser, but there was a much longer film that I had made, which is about half an hour long, detailing individual stories of leather artisans, and it was screened in this open ground in Kutch with all the artisans and their families present. And all the things that, the way they watch the movie, watching themselves on screen, people who never even left their neighborhood to watch themselves in a movie, and how that kind of reignited a sense of confidence in them. And the things that they came and told me afterwards, that, thank you for listening to our stories, thank you for telling our stories. It makes a huge difference. Like, that kind of boosted my morale to stay in this field.
Ma'am, that was so nice of you to let them come and watch their own movie and their own short clip about their life and their expertise. So, Siddhant, thank you so much for eagerly waiting and asking this question, because Siddhant was been waiting from a long time. So, thank you so much again, Siddhant. And now we'll take our last question by Zulfi sir. He's a school teacher at my school, Podarovati. So, and all of the other questions will be answered in the next round too. So, Zulfi sir, I'll just unmute you.
Thank you so much, Kabir. I love how the tables have turned. Usually, I'm the one telling Kabir when you should speak or not, but now he gets the opportunity to do that to me. So lovely. I love the way you're conducting this entire thing. You're growing as your events are taking place. So that's great to see, Kabir. I have a few things, Ms. Gandhi, to ask you, and also to tell you, to take this opportunity to tell you this. I met you last time when you had come for the elocution as well.
I remember. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely. And it's really great. At that time, I didn't have this opportunity. Thanks to Kabir, now I do. I want to just tell you, thank you so much for actually being so normal. I mean, as laymen, we feel that children and grandchildren of great personalities just live in this utopian world where they don't have to face everyday struggles like us. But your story just tells us that it's the same grind for everyone. And when Kabir talks about his events, and when he calls it inspiring stories, I think you fit right into that piece very well. So thank you so much for showing the kids that it doesn't matter your lineage, you still got to work hard to carve out your niche for yourself. So thank you. Let me begin by that. Secondly, I'm just going to ask you a very cliche question. Coming from the great personality of MK Gandhi, was it difficult for you to actually find your own place? Wherever you went, I'm sure you must be facing this, that, okay, because you're so and so, we get to meet you, but I want to know only about this person. They would rather ask about him than listen to you and your views? Was that a struggle for you as employment or as a student or things like that?
It wasn't like I wouldn't call it a struggle. First of all, thank you for your kind words. It was very nice to hear that. In fact, I would, this besides my last name, I'm a very quintessentially normal. There's really nothing glitzy about our lives. We're very typical middle class Indian Bombay family. And with regards to challenges, like, I mean, I've faced as many rejections or maybe even more, like I'm still applying for a PhD, the grueling process of like not getting responses, everything, very familiar with it. So, I mean, I think that's just life. But in terms of struggles and, with regards to my identity, initially in school, there were a lot of unkind things that were said to me, like, if I top a paper or whatever, my own friends would say things like, you got these marks because you're Gandhi's grandkid and, whatever. A lot of teachers would be effusively nice to me and my brother, because they also felt a sense of, oh, let's see. Sometimes people do that and it's not in your control. Okay. And as a result, in my college life for about almost a decade, I never told anyone. Like, in fact, in the beginning, I never told anyone. People would just know because in school, everybody knows who you are, who your parents are. But in college, it's different. You kind of control your own narrative. And I took full advantage of that. If people asked me, are you related? I'd just say no. It was really bad. I think that's the other extreme.
Correct.
It's only recently that I've become more comfortable accepting this publicly and, being okay with it, being okay with people making it about that and not about me, because that's fine. You kind of get over yourself sometimes and you say, this is special for people. So you like understand their perspective as well. So yeah, I think now if somebody asks me, I wouldn't say no. But it definitely, if you're having a bad day and this comes up, you just feel extra bad about it.
Absolutely.
But normally it's okay. It's okay. Initially it's a hiccup, but then people get used to you. They see your flaws, they see the person that you are, and then it becomes normal again.
Thank you. See, so normal. You make it sound so normal. You make it sound like the actual.
Because it is very normal.
Exactly. That's exactly why I was so thankful to you in the beginning. I just have two more things that I want to ask you. You like you said, you've traveled internally around India, doing your research as well as doing these lovely stories that you do. Do you feel that traveling abroad is they fantasized it so much that actually you should, do you have anything that you would want to tell these young kids that you should actually explore India before you move out?
I wouldn't attach a timeline to it. I would say explore India whenever you can, even if it's before you go abroad or if it's after. Definitely don't be of the mindset that India has nothing. Like, you will be amazed by the things and I don't want to glorify unnecessarily. There are lots of issues. It is sad sometimes to travel through places where there is visible poverty, where there's visible, conflicts. It's not, but it's such a incredible teacher. What you don't learn in school, what people hesitate to speak to you about, you will see when you travel to. And because of the, variety, the population demographic in India, you will see a variety of perspectives, and that will devastate you, but it'll also kind of equip you with a perspective, which if you plan to go abroad in the future, to do your Ivy League programs, they really value that you have that kind of a perspective. Obviously, don't do it for the Ivy League admission, do it for yourself, but it is
learn through their travels.
Yeah, and also, like, I wouldn't demerit traveling abroad. It's a very expensive process to go abroad.
No, I said that we fantasize traveling abroad so much that we forget that we have a country to explore ourselves. Like, we have an entire, like you said, there's so much variety to travel and to see so much.
Yeah. We do glamorize it. Also, I think everyone does that about foreign lands. Like, Westerners, exotify India and the global South. So that's a natural instinct. But yes, I mean, as Indians, we do tend to like, oh, I'm going to Switzerland, but I've never been to a hill station in India.
Correct.
Maybe that should
Absolutely.
change a little bit.
Okay. Last one before I leave, Kabir. Is that okay? Kabir, is that fine? Thank you. All right. Now, as a young generation lit major, you like you said, you love literature, and I just want to take this opportunity to give you, if you had the opportunity to tell me. Now, I teach grades 5, 6, 7, an age where kids either want to read, whether they start picking the kind of literature that they would grow up with, and things like that. What would you suggest to a teacher like me? What should kids have in their arsenal of literature? What should they be reading? What should they have? Like, now you've gone through it. If you had to come back and actually have the opportunity to do it again, what would you like to have?
So in school, we had a very singular focus on Shakespeare, and that was very interesting, obviously. But I feel like I only learned about Indian writers, independence era writers, which is, writing of activism, writing of very historical times, where they would communicate their conditions via poetry, via essay. There are lots of translations available, as well as post-colonial literature, which is Ezekiel, and all sorts of writing about India coming into its own identity, and then liberalization and so on. So I think in school, it would have been nice to have a more localized approach towards literature. There is a lot of English literature available, English writing available from our own people, which I think this whole like saying that I would rather go abroad than be here comes from this fixation on Western defined what is literature, what is a classic, and everything.
Correct. So a balance between Indian as well as global literature.
Yeah. Because there's so much. I mean, I'm sure you've also read it.
Exactly. So like that's why I wanted to hear from you, being a lit major and everything.
But at the same time, I will say that I find this whole like, oh, India is the greatest place ever, also a little bit not okay.
I'm also not on the same thought process. All I just wanted to hear was, if you had the opportunity to do it again, what would you like? What would you enjoy?
Yeah, I would have really liked to read more poetry from Indian women, from Pakistani writers, who wrote at a time when those two were the same place. Where else are you going to learn what it felt like living in those times? It's through stories, right? So I think if that's actually my focus of the environmental education research that I'm doing, is that we don't study about our local environmental histories, and that's why we don't grow up with solutions to these specific problems.
Thank you.
Right? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kasturi. Kabir, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for asking these set of questions. Even I couldn't think of some of them, so thank you so much again. So, Ms. Kasturi, my next question, I mean, before that, actually, Zulfisa asked you a few questions about literature. So, on that note, I would actually like to introduce a special guest who is here, Ms. Rati Dadiwadia. So, she's a literature expert and she's an ex-principal of St. Mary's School, and she still teaches literature to many people. So, not St. Mary, Queen's Mary School, and she's very inspiring, and I'm privileged to have her here with us. So, Ms. Rati, would you like to say a few words? Ma'am, I've given you an option to unmute. You actually need to just click on the button. So.
It's very kind of you, Kabir. He's telling me that I'm inspiring, but I think that Kabir is one of the youngest, most inspiring kids I've come across. Though he's not my student, he will become my student, I'm sure, because I would love to do some Shakespeare with you at some point of time. I was so excited when he said that this is the interview that he was going to do. And especially, of course, all of us are fans of Mahatma Gandhi ji. So that is something really amazing. How he got in touch with you, I have no idea. How he thought of you, I have no idea. But this is the kind of inspiring work that he does. He makes videos, and I am now beyond the age of understanding technology and all these digital confusions in my mind. So I think he's really a wonder when he can make videos and when he can think of these kind of things for a young little chap who's in standard 7 to think of interviewing you and others also. And how interesting and how exciting it is, I think, for the audience, especially those who are students and those who are teachers, as your teacher yourself spoke just now. My first thought when he told me that you are the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhiji was, oh, how I wish I could meet you. So when the pandemic is over, that's one thing you'll have to do. You'll have to come to my house for a cup of my wonderful ginger mint tea.
Wow. Thank you very much. It would be a pleasure.
I want to know exactly your relationship with Mahatma Gandhi.
Okay, so I come from the second son, Manilal Gandhi. His son, Arun Gandhi, is my paternal grandfather. So it's M.K. Gandhi, his son, Manilal Gandhi, his son, Arun Gandhi, his son, Tushar Gandhi, and I am his daughter.
Fantastic.
So
What a wonderful lineage to have. You must be so proud of it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you don't have your own identity, but to be the 5th lineage of Mahatma Gandhiji, what a marvelous thing.
Yeah.
What a blessing of God Almighty.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I'm a great fan of Gandhiji, as I don't know who is not. But the greatest thing that I admire is his courage that without violence, in the deepest sense, you can achieve the world, which is a lesson which every one of us in the world has to learn. Therefore, I'm a great fan also of Martin Luther King. And I also feel so proud that Mahatma Gandhiji's mentor was Dadabhai Nauroji, who is a Parsi, of course, everyone knows that. And that also makes me very proud and happy to be a Parsi. At the same time, I think appreciating, learning to love, to be a human being more than a Parsi or a Hindu or a Maharashtrian or a Christian or a Muslim or whatever is so important in life. And Mahatma Gandhiji showed us the path of equality. He called the Shudras Harijans, God's people. And that was, I think, the most important lesson he taught us. I feel so privileged that I was born and my mommy daddy were both extremely liberal. And my prayer table just now, if you can see it when you come, every possible icon is there because God is one. His names may be many, but whether we are Muslims or Christians, Hindus or Jews or Parsis or whatever, we are all human beings, all created by the same creator, the identity. And if only everyone would realize that, and if everyone would feel that, there would be no need for any wars, and we would come to Ram Rajya, or the kingdom of God, where we would be one world of human beings.
Yes, ma'am. That's so. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Professor Wadia.
Thank you for
Lovely to
giving me the opportunity to speak to this amazing lady.
Thank you so much,
It was
ma'am.
amazing listening to you, and I hope we can meet in person.
Yes, we will meet.
Yeah.
God willing, we will meet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kabir.
So yes, let's move on to the last bit of questions, and then again we can go back to the audience to ask their set of questions because I've seen many of people are excited to ask questions to you, Ms. Kasturi, and I'm getting a few of them on the chat too. So I think I'll finish my part of questions, and then we can go back to the audience. So before Miss Rati, Zulfi sir was talking about how people people make a big deal out of going abroad to as a researcher or as a normal layman, a big thing. So I think many researchers. What do you think as a researcher? Can you digress from the space you're researching, or your focus has to remain restricted? So suppose you're an environmentalist researcher, so can you research on different lines of topics too, or you need to stick to your part of research?
That's a very, very good question. And it's one that I grapple with often. So I, given my very interdisciplinary past in terms of career, I always have like, oh, I want to research on this. Oh, this would be an interesting topic. Basically, a lot of things, your mind is just, especially when you're working on your own, you just feel like you're the boss of yourself. So it's very difficult to stay focused. In terms of hiring, in terms of getting into PhD programs and graduate degrees, it's good to have a singular focus on your CV, on your portfolio. When people see that you've kind of gone to points A, B, C, D, E, F, G versus point A and then gone into A1, A2, it makes a difference when you have a focus, because it displays this like commitment to a field. So from a professional point of view, it's necessary to stay focused, and that's how you also become an expert. Otherwise, you're kind of like a jack of all trades, which very frankly, at this stage in my career, I feel like I am, because I've only been a policy researcher for the past 2-3 years. It would take me a decade to become an expert in this field, because research is a very long process. You have to publish, you have to present your research, and you have to actually find research that is actionable, research that makes a difference in order to, and then that becomes your focus, and then you can afford to kind of diverge. So that is yeah, you have to, it's not advisable to go. And that's the difference between, I guess, a journalist and a researcher, because as a journalist, you have a story which you research in depth for say for a month or two, and you write a long form piece about it, and then you move to a different story. But as a researcher, you're more kind of focused on a single discipline. And it's always good to do that, because otherwise there's so much information out there that you become bamboozled and you just completely lose track.
Yes, no, that's totally correct, because in this researching, people are really interested, and are really many people don't have the opportunities to become a researcher because of the lack of funds, but people do still try to follow their passion and choose the right career. So, ma'am, I have another question to you. So, since you have started being a researcher, chosen that career, as you said, 4-5 years from now, you started this. Do you feel people are taking research as their career more than before? And are there more avenues and opportunities now when you started? How wide is the scope for aspiring researchers in today's time?
The scope is very wide, because like I said, there's chiefly two types of research, which is qualitative and quantitative. Now, if you are good at quant skills, at statistics, at numbers, and you have the imagination to apply that mathematical knowledge to the real world, you are an asset to big firms, like McKinsey, Deloitte. All of them have very strong research teams based on whom, their market research is what informs their company-wide actions and policies. And the World Bank, for example, all of these like really big places that we grow up looking up to require researchers. So the scope is endless. It's always good to have research skills. It's always good to be able to read data and to be able to make your decisions based on data, because then you are kind of working in synergy with what's going on around you. And you're not doing something that is in your own mind alone. So yes, like I would say, like for many, this is becoming a field that is not just optional, but is important to learn if you want to get into a good place to study abroad or to do your masters or to have a career at these big places. Yeah. I don't know if, like, I think researchers see, the thing is that the way we are presented with facts is also like, the researchers have been around for the longest time, maybe because we didn't have so much access to information before. We've never read their work. Like, for example, when I was doing my reading for my current topic, I found papers and articles written by researchers in the 60s, in the 40s, that have resonance even today. So researchers have always been there. They've always been trying to get people's attention. Okay, here are the facts. Please look at them first. A lot of our problems today are because we don't listen to research. Like, we don't pay attention to it.
So, for me at least, me being a grade 7 student, research is just in school. Like, suppose for an assignment or a task, you research on a certain topic. And for me, many of us, I think, never knew that there's such a wide scope for people to actually choose their career in researching. And many people who are good in research may not know that there is this career available, and you can do this if you really want to chase your goals and follow your passion. So, ma'am, I think this is my last question. I've cut down on many of the questions because I'm sure the audience are also very excited to ask their set of questions. So, continuing to the last question, are there any limitations this space has or restricts you, which you think should change or evolve up on in the coming years? And also, one more thing which I think I've learned in school is that citations are really important in research. So, how important are they on your level of researching and talking to different people and going around the world or around going to different places?
Yes. So in terms of limitations, this is not, unless you're a part of a larger firm where your research is the basis on which people build their work. It's not a very well-paying job. A lot of times you kind of do all your work and then find funding once you have established your own work. So a lot of times you'll work without a salary. I think, like, compared to my peers and my friends, I don't really make that much money, because I sometimes not any money at all, because the sad bit about research is that you really have to prove yourself and to prove that what you're doing is relevant to the larger field of study. And that takes a lot of time to get the time and attention of people, to follow up with them, to present yourself. So I think funding is a huge issue. If you find that, then your limitations decrease, but otherwise there are lots of limitations. Secondly, I think society and social groups, of our own lives, they don't really understand what you do, because they'll just be like, oh, she's researching something, something, something. I never know what she's doing, kind of a thing. So it's very difficult to kind of have that very sure identity of, okay, I'm an engineer, or I'm a lawyer. I can never say something like that. I always have to explain what I'm doing. So this need to, not need, but proving yourself is very difficult. Thirdly, the limitations are that if you're looking for quick returns, then this is not a very happy place, because again, it takes a lot of time to put your findings on paper, to then disseminate your findings, to communicate your findings to the larger world. And very often, even after you've put your heart and soul into it and, created all this stuff for people to read, they never read it. In fact, they'll do the complete opposite of what you have kind of scientifically said should be done. So it is a bit frustrating. And I guess in school itself, like I have only recently learned about the variety of things that you can research in. In school, it was just so like either arts or science or commerce. That approach, I hope it's changing. I don't know what it's like for you, as a seventh grader or your peers. But at least when I was growing up, there weren't a lot of windows opened up for us that you can do this, you can do that. So that was one of the limitations.
So also on the citations part, how
Citations, yeah.
important it is? Yeah.
They're very important because plagiarism is a very big thing in research. And you cannot, although you will always stand on the shoulders of the research work done before you, of the researchers who came before you, there has to be originality. And when you are original, it shows that you've applied your mind to this and you've not entirely copy pasted. I find citations even today very difficult to do because there are different formats of citations. Like you have the APA format, you have MLA format, and it can get really like, imagine you've written like 100-page paper, and then you have to do this huge thing of like, okay, this was the author, this was the date, this is the string. And another limitation is that accessing all of this research is also not always free of cost. If you don't have an institutional affiliation, you don't have the money to pay. Like sometimes it's like dollars worth of money to just access a 3-page paper. So a lot of research is not democratized. It's not open source available. That is changing. There are ways to, a lot of people trying to make research free. But yeah, sorry, I was talking about citations and I went on to this, but citations are challenging, but they're important. So while you're younger, it's better to get into the habit of using them correctly through your paper and at the end of it as references. And as a researcher, you want to someday make it into the citations of somebody else's paper because they've used your findings.
Yes, ma'am. So even as a grade 7 student, I am always told to cite my work, and I'm very lazy on that part. Obviously, in the end of the research paper, we have to add each and every citation, picture citation.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we as 7th graders don't write 100-page research papers, but even whatever 3 or 4, 5 pages, I find it very difficult, and I really don't like citations. But as you said, it is very important to give credit to another person for their work used by us. And yes, it's very important in not only your career, but each and every career a person.
Yeah. Because think about it this way, it's probably the only reward a researcher is going to get is that their name appears in somebody else's
Yes.
research.
So yes, I think I'm done with my questions from my side. Now I think the audience has many questions that they are eagerly waiting to get answered by you. So I think one of the teachers also from my school, Miss Diti, is also waiting to ask a question to you. So Miss Diti, I'm just gonna unmute you.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have some network issues here. That's the reason. All right. To start with, Kabir, you're doing a fab job. You are my inspiration story to start with. At this age, I don't think I was thinking this way. But yes, it's a brilliant thing that you're doing. And thank you, Ms. Gandhi, for being a part of the show and giving us these inspiring stories. Because as young learners, I think this kind of story do make us feel that, you deal with failures and challenges and then rise. However, my question is from a point of view of facilitator, though this question has reduced its importance by the discussion we just had on plagiarism. My question was, how would you guide these young learners in the school levels through research work, because we as IB educators, we insist a lot on researchers. and almost every subject brings that up. So starting so early in school life,
Mm.
do you want to send out any messages to them? I mean, how can they do their work better? Any particular, like for citation, do you
Mm.
recommend any particular website or an app or anything which will help them through in their work, anything like that? And my
Um,
question was, how do you think I mean, you're definitely an inspiration to these young learners in terms of environment that you're doing, things that you're doing with it. Do you want to send out any more messages that they can bring about changes, that they are the new citizens, the upcoming citizens of the country, and bring about a change? So yeah, please.
Yeah, sure. So, the first question about how to like incorporate, please correct
Hmm.
me if I'm wrong, was to how to incorporate more research in their learning
Right.
experience,
Yeah,
and how they can, I guess, improve and be more diligent about citations.
right.
I think there are lots of sources available freely on the internet about how to cite an article. There are citation generators also, which kind of
Mhm.
see, you still have to put in like feed data into it. Like they give you boxes like what is the last name of this author once you put
Mhm.
the link and stuff. So that work you'll still have to do. So I guess when you're starting out, my advice would be to learn it the old school way and not be reliant on a generator, because that
Mhm.
way you have the foundational knowledge, and if someday you don't have access to a computer, you can still write your citation on your
Correct.
own.
Yeah.
And in that way, I guess, just reading those titles, reading those words again and again informs how you will give titles to your work in the future.
Yes.
So I think it's a good practice to not um, always rely on a citation generator.
Generator.
Maybe have like a seminar with a research on how to be better at citing work, what are the types of citations that are there. In terms of integrating more research into your curriculums, I guess sometimes reading can get very monotonous, and like just reading research papers and so on, very difficult at this age.
Mhm.
Maybe incorporating like cinema, music, um, any audiovisual mediums which have put in a lot of research into their, like a lot of
Yes.
Netflix documentaries, for example, right now
Right.
have
Yes.
been made after decades of research. Like the way National Geographic operates, it's that it puts its cameras into the wild for like years, and then you watch it in
Mhm.
3 minutes. So I think
Yeah.
appreciating at this age what exactly the scope of research is, that it's sometimes it's longitudinal, which means that it goes from the 60s to 2020, and
Mhm.
the researchers kind of put it together into this concise brief line or video clip for you to understand. So
Yeah.
appreciating that at this age will condition you to kind of grow up thinking that there's no shortcuts. Sometimes you really have to pay attention to the larger story.
Mhm.
So that is how to incorporate research into what you
Yes.
guys are learning. And as citizens, as the future, um, firstly, I just feel like even my own generation is inheriting a lot of the issues of the climate crisis, of the
True.
pandemic and everything, and it's kind of this unfair hand that we've been dealt. But
Mhm.
being sensitive the way everyone, like I see in this program, especially Kabir and your peers, the curiosity, the way that you conduct yourself, the politeness with which you speak,
Mm.
the sensitivity and empathy, I think those should please like keep them as values that you hold close. Because I mean, growing up with like an arrogant mindset is not going to help in the world that we are inheriting. Like we have to be able to understand each other's issues and not operate from a conflict mindset, but from a resolution empathy mindset.
Very true.
So I hope that we will be better than those before us.
Agreed. Completely agreed. Thank you so much. Thanks,
Yeah.
Kavi.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for asking that question. I think Yashwant has been waiting eagerly to ask his question. So thank you so much for waiting, Yashwant. I'm just gonna unmute you. Yeah, you can speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Hello, I am Yashwant Shetty and I have a question for you, ma'am. Ma'am, can we create thoughts among people about saving environment?
Can we create thoughts amongst people to save the environment? Yes, absolutely. Like that's the thing that we have to do, is to create a sensitivity and to also understand, like we can learn from each other as we try to save the environment. That's actually my answer, that we can create positive thoughts and more informed opinions amongst the people about the environment. But like for that, like political governmental support is very necessary, because without that you don't really have access to the masses.
That's totally true. Thank you so much, Yashwant, for asking that question. And yes, people should know on how to care about their surroundings, about the environment. And people like Miss Kasturi help us know about it, because she, being an environmental researcher, will know about all of this and help and reach all of this to us. So I think Ridhima has also been waiting. Ridhima, I'm just going to unmute you so that you can ask your question.
Hi, Miss Kasturi. I'm Radhima, and my question is, what challenges are there being an environmental scientist?
Hi, Ridhima. Thank you for calling me an environmental scientist. I think we spoke about the challenges earlier, but very briefly, it's a long process. That's a big challenge. Sometimes it gets very lonely because you're alone with all your reading and writing, and you don't always have colleagues. Um, Traveling to your places of research can be challenging. Sometimes, as a woman, the way public infrastructure is designed, in some places you don't have access to like bathrooms for the whole day. That all of that is like a part and parcel of being a researcher. Sometimes people will not talk to you. That's challenging, because then where do you get your data from? Finances can be a challenge as well. Language barriers, lack of motivation. Lots. The list is pretty endless.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And there are challenges in each career, but we need to follow our passion, chase our goals, and always and never give up, obviously. So I think we have a few questions in the chat too. And one of the questions is from Miss Marsha. Actually, she was also the one who helped me connect to you, Miss Kasturi. So 1 minute, yes. Miss Marsha asks, would you, Miss Kasturi, be able to combine a film and environmental concerns to create documentaries for mags like the National Geographic?
Would I be able to do that? I'm not sure, because I don't possess the kind of technology that that level of filmmaking requires. Having said that, they also like recruit a lot of local partners and research associates. For example, when I was working on this part of Raigad, which is Uran, where there are wetlands which are being encroached upon and so on, I had a research associate in that area. So for every place that, again, I need to acknowledge this as a researcher, is that researching in India for people like me is only possible because there are local partners available to take time out from their life and help you. So for example, in Uran, there is this young man, he's younger than me, his name is Parag. He dropped out of school, but he was very passionate about the environment. So he invested in a camera. And mind you, this is a very humble family, fishermen. His father he drives an auto rickshaw in Uran. His mother's a homemaker. He dropped out, saved money, bought a camera, bought bird encyclopedias, and learned about his ecosystems. And now when I go to Uran, he's the one who explains to me what this place is and what features it has. Something that my professor wouldn't be able to teach me, he is able to do that. So when people like him record footage and photographs from their geographies, I think big names like National Geographic pick these up and use them in their, because without local partners, they would not be able to make these films. Whether I am able to do that, I mean, I'm sure if I like put my heart to it and, you know, work towards that goal, I would be able to. But I kind of haven't picked up my camera in about 5 years. So it would take a while before I'm able to contribute to a proper film again.
Thank you so much, Miss. And Angad has another question to ask. He's very eager and excited. So I think this will be the last question for the day. And if there are any other questions, you can message me on my number and or also on the Instagram handle at Insas Stories. And yes, Angad, all over to you.
Yes. So my question is from you, ma'am. How did you think of becoming an environment researcher?
I didn't think about it too much. I just kind of, when I was in doubt, I questioned what I was really passionate about. And at that time, what was the most appropriate step to take given the challenges and conditions of the time, which was the pandemic. And before that, when I was doing my master's, I felt like this is what I'm most passionate about. So I let passion kind of guide me. And I also felt like being an environmental researcher combined all the skills that I had picked up in the past few years while working in different capacities. So that's how I chose to become an environmental researcher.
Okay, I think
Kabir, I just want to say something. I read the question properly again from Miss Marsha. I also wanted to add that there are lots of programs that there's National Geographic Kids. There's actually a magazine called Sanctuary Asia, which is run from Mumbai, which is dedicated to the environment. All of these publications and media houses have channels for kids. So if, say, Podaro RT was to come together and make a film or a documentation of Mumbai's environmental issues, and if you pitched it to them, there might be a way that one can kind of contribute to these things. Like we made a documentary on the Mithi River for a college project, like for one semester. And that's how we got in touch with NABARD as well. They saw this movie and they were like, okay, we would like to have you on board. So
yes, ma'am, surely. Thank you so much. So it's such a fun time. What a fun time it was with Miss Kasturi and the audience. So before we end this event, I would like to thank everyone here because I extend my gratitude to a very special guest, like I mentioned, Miss Rati, who is from the education space, and also to all my school teachers, most of them who attended this event and who always make time for my events and always support me. So I'm really happy to always see them supporting me. And obviously, last but not the least, I would like to thank all the audience here and Miss Kasturi for so nicely and so kindly helping this initiative grow and helping all of the audience um, choose the right career and know about your career better. So thank you so much everyone to be here. It was indeed a pleasure anchoring this event. And our next lined up event is in March with Keep Guessing Who. So stay tuned with inspiring stories and follow us on Instagram on our Instagram handle Insas Stories and on my YouTube channel Kabir Jaising. So stay safe and have a good night. Thank you so much, everyone.
thank you, Kabir. It was a pleasure to be here and I'm very inspired by you.
Thank you so much, Miss. Everyone is actually inspired by you. Thank you so much for coming here.
All the best and take care, everybody.
Thank you so much. And this whole meeting was also live on YouTube. So if you want to catch it again or share it to your friends or family, please do. Thank you so much again, everyone. Thank you, Miss.
Thank you. Bye-bye.